The story begins with a happy young man standing in a chic outfit and with a confident look. He was congratulated on receiving a cash prize of 1 billion yuan. This was observed by a young boy who thought it was wonderful and it would be nice to just sit, do nothing and own billions, and the elite beauties themselves would stick to him. First, he would want a cute and obedient cat girl, then a strong and slightly naughty tsundere, and also a naive loli. Married ladies are also good, and mature women are simply a must-have. The boy, blushing a little, decided that of course Yu Shuan would remain his main wife. Suddenly, the boy's mother came up to him and hit him on the forehead. She noticed that he had resumed his game and asked if he had washed the dishes. He immediately said that he would go and do it now. The boy thought to himself that it was a pity. It was all just his imagination. Meanwhile, the famous businesswoman Gu Ya acquired several old companies. She also acquired the Longxing Company and carried out very strict reforms. The comrade said that if he had known they were going to be laid off, he wouldn't have bought that gear last week. Now he has no money to pay for the apartment. Then the boy decided to offer him some money on loan. The comrade asked in response what he was talking about and said that his situation was no better. Meanwhile, the entrepreneur was broadcasting that this disposal was necessary for the optimization of the industry. Firing useless employees is a step towards long-term growth of the company. The guy called her a nasty woman, and who is she calling useless now? He would hang all the heartless capitalists. His comrade asked him to forget about it because this was the great Mrs. Gu, and there was no need to get into trouble. But the boy sadly replied that they were both left without work, and that he really couldn't even swear. A whole month had passed since the guys were fired. The boy, as usual, was sitting near the monitor and holding the control panel in his hands. He continued to play games and never left his computer, constantly thinking about something. He received a notification that he had failed the second round of interviews again, and his resume did not meet their requirements. They were only hiring fresh graduates, and his chances of getting a job were gone again. The game was over. The kid had died in this game again, and he hit the table with his fist in frustration. He again had insufficient funds in the game, and he thought about it. Almost a month of unemployment has passed, and he still hasn't found a job. What will happen if things continue like this? His friend said he's not like that. He has a girlfriend, he's cool at games, and he's a good person, and he thinks of himself as just worthless. The boy replied that every family has its own troubles. Xiaowan's family has them too. Before he could finish speaking, the phone rang. Xiaowan appeared at the threshold. He opened the door for the girl and asked if she had returned. Xiaowan asked if he had been playing the game all day. The boy replied that he had been playing all day. Then she asked if he had been drinking too. The girl was holding an empty bottle of alcohol, and the boy started to deny it and said that it was his friend Da Lun who came in, and they had a little drink together. Xiaowan asked Ye Fei to look at himself. Since he was fired, all he does is play. Ye Fei replied that he was looking for a job and asked to just give him a little more time. The girl got angry and asked how much more time he needed. The other guys had already received promotions and salaries, and he couldn't even earn enough for game equipment. Ye Fei lowered his head and told Xiaowan that he had been fired just a month ago. Did she really want to break up with him now? The girl replied that yes, and she couldn't do it anymore. Mom was right. There was no future with him. Xiaowan said goodbye to the boy and called him a big loser as she left with a suitcase in her hands. Ye Fei got really angry and slammed his fist on the table with all his might, realizing that he had lost his girlfriend. After that, he threw something at the monitor screen where his favorite game was playing. Extremely low wealth levels were detected and high levels of despair were recorded. The system launched the billionaire game. This is what happened after hitting the monitor. The boy was very surprised when he saw an unusual system in front of him. A blue ball appeared in front of him and rose into the air in front of the broken monitor. It was already in front of his face, and the boy did not understand what it was and what kind of system it was. The billionaire game is designed to give players a unique wealth management experience. Within a given time, using the system, he must either spend or increase the starting capital to a specified amount. Completing tasks brings rewards and failure leads to punishment. The system is going to assign him a personal assistant. The boy was very surprised and asked what kind of assistant they were going to appoint for him. A girl appeared on the monitor who greeted the owner and congratulated him on becoming the only beta tester of the billionaire's game. She introduced herself as his personal assistant, Meng Ling. Ye Fei asked her to get off him first, and then they could talk. Meng Ling approached the protagonist and asked him to register his starting capital. The boy immediately agreed, and the girl exclaimed that his starting capital had been determined. She started clapping her hands and congratulated him on receiving 10 million. Ye Fei was simply shocked by what was happening and said that he had never seen such money in his life. Meng Ling explained that the money had been credited to his account and they could now move on to the first task. Ye Fei asked him to wait, as he had not yet had time to enjoy the moment. The girl explained that he had to spend 20% of the available funds within 2 hours. The reward for completing the task was 5 million. Ye Fei was very surprised that he only needed to spend 2 days and thought it was easy. He thought about where to find a game store and decided to buy a few things and be done with it. The assistant was surprised and asked what other game store. Then, the boy asked the assistant how to play if there was no game store. Mengling replied that the billionaire game's finances are real money. They can and should be used only in real life. The girl asked the main character to follow the rules of the game. He was surprised that it was real money and could not believe that he had become a multimillionaire. Mengling explained to the protagonist that he had 5 hours left. It was necessary to finish spending the money as soon as possible. Ye Fei exclaimed that it was easy, and he would just buy himself a Rolex. The boy was already in the store and approached the girl who was standing behind the counter. He put the watch on his wrist and asked the saleswoman how much this model cost. The girl looked at him with disdain and replied that it was a limited edition. Ye Fei looked at the girl with a sarcastic look and thought that this was the very moment when the arrogant saleswoman got what she deserved. Suddenly, the phone in his pocket rang and he quickly took it out, trying to figure out who was calling. They called him Godfather on the phone and asked to save him. The boy asked what happened and said that he was already running. The salesgirl thought that this was all a classic when a beggar pretends to talk on the phone. Ye Fei looked at the girl and said that he would take everything that was on the counter. The girl smiled in response and, looking down, said that she would pack everything now. The main character was very happy and thought it was simply wonderful to understand the power of money. It was just a thrill for him. When he entered the room, his ex-girlfriend decided that he came to buy her a gift. But the boy handed the box with the expensive watch to his assistant girlfriend. She answered, looking him in the eyes, that she did not need it, but he did it demonstratively in front of his ex. He asked the assistant to stop and take the gift. Zhao Wan was simply shocked and did not recognize Ye Fei. She thought that there must have been a mistake. The girl on the screen said that the match was over and the winning streak was 33 games in a row. The main character asked his friend if he had really called him for this reason. Dalong explained that this streamer is just crazy and has thousands of subscribers and generally wins every arcade battle. If he doesn't get even now, he'll just burn with shame. Is there really no one in this game who plays slowly, like a human being? The girl exclaimed that if he wins, she will grant any wish. It is necessary to sign up and enter the battle. Dalong asked his friend to win against her at least once. He will not calm down if the boy does not win, and asked to treat himself to dinner at his expense. Ye Fei told his friend to forget about dinner and stop spending money on it. A girl appeared on the phone and greeted brother Ye Fei. Meanwhile, the game was going on, and the girl Machman had incredible speed and she was, as always, at her best. The girl noticed that the main character seemed to be a newbie. Ye Fei replied that it was indeed his first time playing, but he already understood the essence, and when the boy started playing, the Machman decided that he was pretending to be a beginner in order to dominate. It couldn't be that he was playing for the first time. She asked him to wait and said that she had one more skill left. The girl who invited him to the game was very surprised that he defeated her. She looked at the boy and asked him to just tell her what he wanted her to do. The guys advised her to dance on the pole. The girl replied that she actually doesn't know how to dance. Then the guys put forward their ideas to dance with striptease, and they were even ready to pay her for it. The main character held the phone in his hands and, smiling, decided to offer the girl to just sing the song Courage, and that would be enough. They considered him to be a generous guy as always. The girl clenched her fists and thanked brother Ye Fei for the song request. She promised to sing to him from the bottom of her heart, and the guys thought that Machman had a very nice voice. She was a real decent girl, not some cheap streamer. One young man switched to the broadcast chat. He was interested in how she sold likes, and now pretended to be noble. He decided to show Ye Fei who was the boss, who even wanted to listen to the songs, and he is first in the rating. So everyone does what he says, so he asked her to dance quickly. Kwando became the first on the list of fans. He began to give the girl many gifts and asked her to dance immediately. The main character carefully watched what was happening and read all the correspondence. Machman started crying and telling Kwando that she really couldn't dance. Then he gave her the command to take off her clothes if she couldn't dance. DeLong got angry and called him a nasty guy. He uses the lemon system where rich fans can do anything to make the girl on the stream do dirty things. Ye Fei was surprised and a little upset, and replied that he didn't know how to do this with money. Da Lun explained to his friend that the Lemon platform gives top fans almost moderator rights so that they donate more. And if such a fan complains, then the streamer will really be banned. The boy thought again and asked if money really decides everything here. He turned to his assistant Meng Ling and asked whether his virtual expenses would also be counted. The girl replied that of course they would count, and a large amount appeared on the screen. 50,000 is the maximum for one gift, and the boy considered it a big bore. Ye Fei gave Makman 40 galactic starships, and the guys in the chat were simply shocked by this turn of events. It was the first time they had seen a galactic starship. And here there were 40 of them. That's a whole 2 million yuan. Ye Fei came out on top among the fans, and the girl looked at him with tears in her eyes and a smile. The main character told Quan Dao that this stream was now his, and so if he didn't want to get kicked out of here, he should just keep his mouth shut. Da Lun was simply shocked by his friend and asked where he got so much money. Ye Fei replied to his friend with a laugh that he just had a little windfall and he would tell him another time. Meanwhile, Makman, blushing a little, thanked the main character. His assistant suddenly appeared next to the boy, and he asked why she hung up. Meng Ling replied to Ye Fei with a stern look that it was time to receive the reward. The angry boy asked if she really didn't understand anything. Gratitude from a beauty is also a great reward. The girl immediately apologized to the owner and explained that she did not have an emotion module installed. But bending down in front of the main character, she promised to keep this data, and so the reward of 5 million yuan was received. Meng Ling explained that this was his reward for completing the task of spending the money. She asked if he wanted to exchange her for the beauty's nobility. Ye Fei immediately laughed back and said that there was no need to do that. Cash was much more necessary, and what a beauty there was. The boy raised his hand and exclaimed that today he had money and she could buy whatever she wanted. He promised to treat her today, and they stood in the middle of the parking lot near the cars. Meng Ling reported that, according to the analysis, he himself suddenly began to show interest in buying a car. The boy took the girl by the head with one hand, covered her mouth with the other, and smiling said that she had caught him. One guy asked Miss Xiaowen to explain about the tires. The girl replied that these tires were specially optimized for increased grip, and the boy thanked her. This guy said that he accidentally dropped a lighter under the car and asked Miss to pick it up. She was upset and didn't want to do it. Meng Ling noticed that she was the one who appeared in his gallery most often and asked if she was his girl. The boy replied that it was his ex-girlfriend. The guy who asked her to get the lighter said that the customer is always right, and she doesn't even pick up the lighter. I'll have to talk to her manager. Then Xiaowen bent down and began to crawl under the car. The cheeky guy laughed and said that this car had a rather low frame. When he began to extend his hand to the girl, the main character suddenly appeared. He grabbed his hand and said that the guy himself was not able to buy a new lighter, and that he had only come to the car dealership to show off. Xiaowen was surprised by the protagonist's appearance and called him by name. The impudent guy asked her not to meddle in other people's business, and said that with this order, he would provide her with enough for 6 months in advance. Ye Fei listened to the guy and pointed his finger to the side, and suddenly Xiaowan appeared next to him. She asked the protagonist not to react so harshly and explained that it was the boss of Ilanbo Electronic Technology himself. The girl thought to herself that if he decided to take revenge on her, she would definitely be in trouble. This impudent guy came up to her and laughed and exclaimed that she was ready to show him herself. Ye Fei raised his fist up and threw the card straight onto the hood of the car, explaining that he was taking this car, and the girl was very surprised and looking at the main character asked where he got so much money. The impudent guy asked the boy not to argue. He asked if this car was worth all his wife's savings. The main character pointed his finger towards the Rolls-Royce and said that he was taking this car as an extra. For his girlfriend, such a car is just a toy. Does he consider it a proper gift for his wife? Xiaowan was simply shocked. She blushed and wondered, since when did Ye Fei have so much money? Does he really want to bring their relationship back? She looked at the main character with affection, smiling and continuing to blush. The girl smiled and asked the boy why he was spending so much money buying her a car. But Ye Fei approached his assistant Meng Ling and asked her if she liked the car. He explained to the girl that the car was for her. Then the assistant, carefully examining the car, said that this model has excellent performance, aerodynamics, and controllability. The main character pulled her cheek and said that he was not asking about that. It was important for him to know whether she liked it or not. Meng Ling looked closely into the protagonist's eyes and replied that if the owner gives it, it means she already likes it. Xiaowan was very surprised and decided that he had a new girlfriend and he bought a car for her. Who is she to him then? Does he really not want to go back to her? The boy turned towards his ex, after which Meng Ling pressed her lips to his. He began to greedily kiss the girl who had approached him as a token of gratitude. Xiaowan was simply shocked by what was happening and looked at their kiss with sadness. She froze in place, watching what was happening, and sadly lowered her head down. The main character did not expect such a turn of events and asked his assistant what she was doing. Mengling replied that his mood had been found to have worsened, so he was awarded the beauty's gratitude. Does he even understand what a reward is? And the girl immediately apologized to the owner. Ye Fei thanked Mengling in return and said that his mood had become much better. Xiaowan continued to watch this scene with sadness, blushing a little. Meanwhile, when the main character was already at home, Machman offered to accept her as a friend. The boy was surprised and asked who it was. The girl explained that she was streamer Machman, and she had something she wanted to tell him. Ye Fei thought about it and was very surprised. After all, this is the same legendary story when a streamer writes to a top donor herself. Marman was very happy and exclaimed that brother Ye Fei accepted her friend request. Although she decided that she was calling him too familiarly, maybe it would be better to call him Mr. Ye Fei. Or just Ye Fei? The main character looked closely at the phone and noticed that she had been typing for 5 minutes already. Is the girl really going to send him a very long confession? She unexpectedly sent him a confession balloon, and he wondered what it was all about. Machman thanked him for helping her out then. If it weren't for him, she wouldn't have gotten so many new subscribers in this song, A Balloon of Recognition. She sings it only for him and hopes he likes it. The main character covered his ears with his hands and asked if she could sing at all. He looked at the girl and said that it was very good, and not surprising that she makes money from streaming. He thanked the girl for the beautiful song, and she was glad that brother Ye Fei praised her. Machman explained to the protagonist that she had an event the day after tomorrow and asked if he wanted to come in person. The girl thought to herself that this was too intrusive, and she just wanted to thank him in person. Ye Fei was a little scared that this girl wanted to use the moment to hit on him and decided to refuse her. He wrote to Machman that he was busy the day after tomorrow, and the assistant suddenly approached him. The boy asked Mingling what she was doing, and the girl disconnected his connection and asked him to accept a new assignment. The second task is to sponsor a streamer for at least 1 year. Monthly spending on her is at least 1 million yuan. The reward for completing the task during the entire relationship is a monthly reward of 2 million yuan. The main character was very surprised and, getting out of bed, asked if he really should become this girl's sponsor. Ye Fei exclaimed that he was a decent person and preferred mutual love. As for a kept woman, that was too complicated. Mengling replied that the master preferred that the feelings be mutual. Ye Fei asked not to remember this. He turned to his assistant and asked what would happen if he did not accept this assignment. Mengling replied that the minimum reward for the task would be deducted, 200 million times 24 billion. The protagonist exclaimed that he did not have that kind of money. Then the missing amount would be compensated by the player through working off. The boy didn't expect this and, slightly covered in beads of sweat, exclaimed that it was just a scam. The system informed him that if he could not pay, he would have to sacrifice his honor. Meanwhile, Machman looked at the phone with tears in her eyes and realized that the boy had changed his mind. And now, several days have passed and the event took place in a small banquet hall of one hotel. Streamer Machman had an offline fan meeting and the guys were already raising their hands to greet the girl. Mengling looked at what was happening and said that the streamer had more fans. Ye Fei asked his assistant what would happen if he offered to sponsor her. What if she set her male fans on him? Mengling replied that she would not set him on, and she loaded the combat module. She would definitely protect her master. One of the guys exclaimed that a streamer with such singing is organizing a fan meeting. It's easy to make money with otaku. He kept his hands in his pockets and asked her to be smart and make her skirt shorter. Did she really think anyone was interested in listening to her amateur songs? Machman replied that if she sings badly, she can learn, but she does not sell her body. Then the guy didn't calm down and said that she takes fans' money to learn singing. And then she sings only for this top donor Ye Fei. She had settled in very well. But the girl turned away from the impudent fellow and exclaimed that it was all wrong. The main character appeared behind her and asked if she would take his money, learn to sing and sing for all the fans. That was definitely acceptable. He will invest $1 million in training Machman with the best vocal teachers and assemble a professional team. He will fully support her career as a streamer and he will sponsor her. The system detected a player spending $1 million on streamer Machman. The content relationship was established and the task was completed, after which the reward was reported. That impudent guy appeared behind the main character and asked who he was. Ye Fei crossed his arms over his chest, smiled and replied that he was her top donor, Ye Fei. Machman was very surprised by this turn of events. Could it really be brother Ye Fei? Ye Fei told his opponent that if he didn't have the money to pursue the girl, then he didn't need to bark and called him a loser. The enemy came up behind him and clenched his fist. He asked if the boy really thought that because he had a little stinking money he was a king. Before he could even get close to him with a blow, Mengling immediately put out her leg and kicked him with all her might. She started to run the command with the highest priority and turned on Ye Fei's unconditional protection. The boy asked the streamer to continue singing and said that as long as he and his friends were around, nothing would happen to her. The streamer was very surprised and asked the boy why he was helping her so much. Ye Fei replied that she just looked promising, and he was looking for someone to invest in. He wanted to start a company in the streaming and entertainment industry and wanted to invite her. The boy decided that it sounded like the ravings of a maniac. Machman asked if it was really just for that, after which she exclaimed that she understood and would definitely try to become a top streamer. She decided to earn a lot of money for brother Ye Fei. The main character smiled back at the girl and wished her good luck with a wink. Machman apologized to the public for causing everyone concern. She promised to continue having fun and began to sing. The audience applauded her, raising their hands in the air. Ye Fei told his assistant that everything was lost, and he blurted it out in the heat of the moment. He asked if it was too late to buy the entire company. Mengling replied to her master without any emotion on her face, saying that the search was already completed. Based on its assets and market information, the best choice would be Xinguang Entertainment, a company on the verge of bankruptcy and urgently looking for a buyer. In 3 days, the current owner of Xinguang, Zhang Zhe, will be attending a business forum in City A. He will be able to talk to him in person. The boy was delighted and, smiling, exclaimed that this was very good and let it be this one. In front of us stands a huge, tall building that seems to reach up to the sky. The guy approached Mrs. Gu and offered her the text of the speech for Forum A in the city. He asked her to read it, and the girl said that she shouldn't do that. She smiled happily and exclaimed that she had already prepared something more important. In front of us is the business forum of City A, a large, bright room in which a man was located. The man was very surprised and asked if he was really ready to buy out Xinguang Entertainment. In front of the main character was the head of Xinguang Entertainment, Zhang Zhe. Ye Fei offered the man 6 million. Zhang Zhe exclaimed that Xinguang was his brainchild. He personally raised dozens of major internet stars. Less than 10 million. There's nothing to talk about. Ye Fei responded that his company uses an outdated model for cultivating idols. The conversion rate of fans from paying subscribers is less than 3%. And besides, he is now going to be checked by the Department of Culture because of shady contracts. The man was seriously scared and, covered in sweat, asked how he knew about this. The protagonist smiled and thought that this was natural thanks to Mengling's super information network. Ye Fei promised to preserve the company's legal shell and its resources and reformat the direction for incubating streamers. And unused recording studios will be turned into immersive streamer rooms. He ensures that Xinguang gets back on his feet and pulls the contract to the director. He asked him to sign this paper because it would be the most profitable deal in his life. Ye Fei thought about how he had been studying business literature for the past 3 days, and now the man had already started to sign the contract. Suddenly, Ms. Gu appeared in front of them and said that she could offer everything he was offering. She asked Mr. Zhang if he wanted Xinguang to be part of her business plan. The protagonist did not expect her to appear. This is the same Mrs. Gu who bought out their company. The girl said that with Xinguang and the powerful financial support of the Gu Corporation, the restart would go like clockwork, much more reliable than promissory notes from some unknown imposter. Zhang Zhe smiled and said that it was an honor to cooperate with Mrs. Gu. Ye Fei was surprised that she could even say such a thing. The man asked the girl when they would sign the contract, and she replied that she would instruct the legal department to prepare the agreement. The protagonist asked if he could keep the name Xinguang. He asked Mrs. Gu if she was okay with it. The girl replied that Xinguang is not some famous name in the market. Why should we keep the brand? He's not going to start telling her about his dreams and sentiments now, because he's not a schoolboy. Then the boy asked what if he was a schoolboy. He asked Mr. Zhang if he really wanted Xinguang to continue living. Then the man apologized to the lady and said that the Xinguang was all he had. Mrs. Gu turned away and exclaimed that it was simply wonderful, and she hoped that he would not regret it. The girl decided to tell everyone a simple thing today and began to tell that the market is a food chain. Big companies have to swallow up small ones to feed on them, and firing is just a way to remove the sick cells. For example, a month ago, she acquired Hellfire Gaming. In that company, 80% of the employees were dead weight. Because of this, they could not maintain even 3 months of cash flow. So her first step after the takeover was mass layoffs. All the guys listened attentively to this speech, and the main character squeezed the glass in his hand. The glass shattered into tiny pieces, and his gaze was serious and upset. Ms. Gu continued her speech and said that she hoped that everyone present would put away unnecessary pity and begin to follow the natural law of survival of the fittest. Suddenly, the boy raised his hand and told Mrs. Gu that he didn't quite know. The girl looked closely at the guy and asked what he wanted to say by this. Suddenly, a system appeared behind him and told the boy that the connection to the main conference server was complete. The guy said that Xinguang had provided their company with 27% of the original IP projects last year. All of these projects were the work of those same tedious employees she had just mentioned. She cut down all the bushes, not realizing that it was the mycelium underground that was the basis of life for the entire tree. Just as Kodak was not destroyed by Fuji, but by thousands of crushed small photo studios that could have become the cradle of digital photography, the guys who were listening to the main character suddenly exclaimed that there was sense in his words. The second guy said that, in fact, the girl from the Gu family was too cruel in her dealings. The girl got really angry when she heard such speeches from the crowd, which had been listening to her very attentively until now. The main character smiled and said that a real giant should be an incubator, not a meat grinder. He approached the girl and said that if she was afraid that the little fish would evolve into a new shark and eat up the Gu Corporation itself, that was why she was doing this. The girl asked permission to find out who he was and what capital he had, what business he was engaged in, and why no one knew about him before. Yefei replied that he was just an investor who liked to raise small fish. The system suddenly appeared and interrupted him, explaining that the random task had been activated. Mengling reported task number 3. Within 3 months, you must increase the turnover of Xinguan Entertainment to 30 million and become an investor in Gu Company. The reward for this is 500 million, and if you fail, you will be fined. Yefei asked if he was really being forced to become a business genius. He thought he could handle Xinguang somehow, but Gu was a billionaire's daughter and her assets were worth $1 trillion. He asked his assistant why on earth she would let him into the investments. And now he was standing in front of Mrs. Gu, looking at her eyes attentively. She smiled and asked if he was going to refuse the task. Then the main character asked in response if he had really gone crazy. He didn't even have money for the penalty, and of course he would accept this task. The girl smiled back at him and exclaimed that it was just wonderful. In front of us is the wide, spacious main hall of the famous Xinguan Company. The guy met the protagonist and asked if he had come to talk about the ransom, calling him Mr. Yefei. The boy raised his hand and asked without ceremony, since he had little time. 30 million in cash for the entire block of shares in their company. He offers to sign now, or if they want to wait until he offers more. But the guy smiled in response and asked the gentleman if he was joking. Yefei explained that their first project was to organize Maman's concert. He wanted this project to blow up the entire city. The guy then replied that if Mr. Yefei provided the funding, they would guarantee the result. The main character explained that in 7 days, he wants to see a circular stage with 3,000 seats and a real meteor shower on the LED dome. The guy standing opposite him asked, "What about the budget?" The main character glanced at his assistant and extended his hand towards her. When the girl handed the card over, Yefei pulled it out to the guy and said that they could spend as much as they wanted, as long as it was within 50 million. The guy asked the gentleman not to worry and said that even if they spent the whole night welding reinforcement, they would still perform a miracle. Yefei lowered his head and asked Meng Ling if this plan would work. It seemed like he had almost spent the entire bonus amount. The assistant replied that this was the best option based on the current situation. The probability of success was about 89%. Then the main character clenched his fist and exclaimed with a smile that he was betting on everything or nothing. And now almost half a month has passed. In front of us is an auto parts market, converted into a streamer base in cyberpunk style. The main character smiled and exclaimed that this was the streamer base that he built for Macman. The girl was very surprised when he brought her to this beautiful room. When she saw how huge this base was, she exclaimed that it was simply amazing. And then, the girl started to shine on stage. She raised her hand up and exclaimed that there was a starry sky around her when the boy pressed the button. She became interested in what these black technologies were, and she would become a big-time streamer. Yefei raised his hand and said, "They will now step up the promotion. Is the main screen in the city center ready?" His assistant replied, looking him seriously in the eyes. That of course the main screen was ready, and so the streamer girl shone on the biggest screen in the city with a microphone in her hands. She thanked Mr. Yefei for such a beautiful scene and said that he was the one who made her dream come true. Mrs. Gu watched this closely. She looked at the girl who thanked the protagonist. Yefei was very happy and clenched his fist, exclaiming that this concert was a hit as he expected. Meng Ling began to calculate the profit and said that the company's current income was 100 million, and it continued to grow rapidly. The boy approached his assistant and, hugging her shoulders, asked if his task would be completed. Meng Ling explained to her master that the success rate was 100%. When she said this, he immediately hugged her. Gu watched from the side and decided that it seemed she had underestimated the main character. The main character stood opposite the entrance to the room next to his assistant. He asked if the guy really thought he could become an investor in the Goo Corporation if he came here. Mengling explained that it had been discovered that the CFO of Goo Corporation had been here 6 times in the last week. Perhaps through him, they could find a weak point. The boy had already entered the room with his assistant and saw people standing there. He looked at the so-called CFO and called him a real pervert. The gentleman was asked to be respectful, and the boy listened to this and turned his head towards these people. Some guy grabbed the girl by the blouse and asked Manager Joe to talk to him. After all, he left a lot of money with her. The girl replied that he knew she was a manager after all. If he continued like this, she simply wouldn't be able to work. Then the man asked her not to play hard to get and said that they were all the same here. He was a platinum client, by the way. And couldn't he have fun even with her? The girl blushed, cried a little, and asked to let her go. She promised that if he didn't let her go, she would call security, and the guy raised his hand up to hit her. He exclaimed, looking at the girl, that if she didn't want trouble, then she shouldn't make her angry. The main character, watching from the side, was simply shocked and asked the man to stop immediately. The man turned in his direction and pointed his finger at him, asking who he was to bother him. The system gave a reward of 10 times the amount of the rescue amount for saving Zhou Hongyu. Ye Fei smiled and thought that the task came just in time for him. He said, looking at the man, that he is the owner of this establishment. And how he thinks does he have the right to stop him? The guy was simply shocked and chuckled and exclaimed that he knew the owner of this place. He asked what this guy was playing here. Meanwhile, manager Zhou Hongyu stood in front of them, covering her body with her hands. Ye Fei asked to prepare the funds in the contract and said that he would buy this club. Not now, but he will be there in a minute. The assistant looked at the owner in response and told him that she would obey and carry out his order. Manager Zhou Hongyu turned to the protagonist and said that she understood that he did this for her. The impudent guy laughed and exclaimed that he could lie more convincingly. This is the best elite club in the city and a cash cow under the Zhou Corporation. Does he really think he can buy it out? The main character folded his arms across his chest and smilingly replied that, if you have money, then nothing is impossible. Mengling approached the owner and reported that the purchase was completed. The boy placed his hand on her head. He smiled at his assistant and said that she had worked quickly, praising the girl. Meanwhile, manager Zhou Hongyu looked at her phone and was very surprised by the new owner. Did they really sell the club? The new owner's first order was to throw out this nasty gentleman. The guards immediately listened to their master. The man exclaimed that they would regret it and he would not forgive them. The protagonist lowered his head and clenched his fist with joy. He considered it a good income. The girl manager stood opposite the main character and smiled happily at him. She thanked the gentleman for this evening, still smiling. The boy couldn't understand why she was handing him the room key and looked at him in surprise. Da Long hugged the protagonist and said that so many years had passed and he came to a class reunion for the first time. He wondered why he suddenly changed his mind. Then the boy replied that he was just trying to unwind. He thought to himself that Mingling was constantly pestering him with this business plan at home, and now he finally had an opportunity to escape. The boy took advantage of this moment and came to the class reunion with his friend. He asked the headman when he would finally marry their senior student. The guy replied that he was shopping little by little. He needed to change his apartment and car. He was already tired of Lamborghini. It would be better to take a Ferrari for the wedding. Sometimes being too rich is also a problem. Then they will have the wedding right in this hotel. If it weren't for his connections, they wouldn't have booked it 3 years in advance. They say that only the truly rich and influential people get a black card. Da Long leaned towards Ye Fei and whispered in his ear that he had become some kind of boss in a foreign company. He didn't think that his classmate could become so rich. The protagonist, watching this, decided that it was just boring. If he had known, he would have stayed home and continued working with his partner on the business plan. Suddenly, a girl entered the room and apologized for being late. The main character looked at her carefully and recognized her as his classmate Tian Ran. And of course, he will never forget that this girl was his first love. A classmate exclaimed that it was their class beauty, Chen Tianran. He asked why she came dressed like that. The girl smiled, apologized, and said that she was too busy and did not have time to change. Then a classmate said that if she was now doing delivery, she was still the queen among couriers. Those losers are probably happy when she brings them food and she probably rakes in a lot of tips. Tianran, upset, exclaimed that it was all a lie. She looked sadly in their direction and hid behind the main character. Ye Fei looked sternly at his classmate and said that they were all in the same class and there was no need to go overboard. Then the boy got angry and asked Ye Fei what he was acting like. A poor man like him thinks that by saying a few words he can please the goddess. Today he is the host. It is his evening and he will say whatever he wants. Tianran asked the protagonist to ignore this classmate, but he gave him a stern look. Ye Fei couldn't stand the injustice and looked at him with disdain. Meanwhile, a girl approached them with some kind of bottle on a tray. The boy suddenly grabbed the bottle of water and approached his classmate. Without thinking twice, he opened the lid and began pouring the liquid on the guy's head. The guy screamed and asked what he was actually doing. The main character looked at him and exclaimed that he had only cooled him down a bit. The girl with the tray was surprised by this turn of events. Ye Fei smiled and said that they could put all the expenses for this room and that bottle of Mao Tai on his account. After he said this, he grabbed his classmate, his first love, by the hand. When the waitress saw the black card, she took it in her hands and exclaimed that she would obey and do everything as he said. The main character took Tianran by the hand and asked her to leave from here, and they went out into the street. The boy dragged her down the street away from the room where the impudent classmate was sitting. Dalong turned to the protagonist and said that the two of them really seemed to be connected by fate. How many circles they made, the basis ended up together. Tianran asked him, blushing, not to talk nonsense, and said that, out of old memories, they had once sat at the same desk. Ye Fei suddenly turned his head towards the girl and said that this was not nonsense at all. Then the friend asked if she didn't understand how he had made that individual notebook with notes for her sake. Tianran asked in surprise if it was really him who did it. All this time, she thought it was Zhao Zhe. Dalong explained that he was busy with his relationship at the time and had no time. It was Ye Fei who stayed up all night for a month to write this notebook. The girl immediately turned to the boy and called him a fool. She asked why he hadn't told her about it before. Then the main character approached her with hugs and asked her not to cry, wondering what was wrong with her. The system gave the task to change her life path, and he became interested in what really happened to Tianran. Meanwhile, the guy asked if the girl had heard that their company was going to be bought out. They say the new boss is still very young. One of the girls asked him if he thought she would have a chance to become the boss's wife if she dressed up a bit. Tianran was carrying boxes at the time. The main character approached her and asked her not to do this anymore. Tianran asked what he was doing here and what he just said. Ye Fei raised his hand with the documents and said that this company now belongs to her. The girl did not expect such a turn of events, and when he took her hand, she asked him to wait. The guys looked closely at this guy and asked if he was the new boss. The girl was also surprised and asked how this boy knew Chen Tianran. A classmate asked why he brought her to his office when they found themselves inside. The boy smiled back, looked at her, and said that this was not his office but hers. Tianran was simply shocked and asked the boy not to joke like that. And how could this be her office? Then he handed over the documents and said that he was really serious. He was going to turn this place into a modern logistics company, install a smart warehousing system, and drone delivery. All of this would be under her control. Tianran exclaimed in fear that she couldn't handle it, and that she was just delivering food. After all, it was his company. He had to manage it. But the boy explained that he had bigger projects. And why did she think she couldn't handle this? The Chen Tianran he knows is hardworking, diligent, and has always been a favorite of the teachers. She's also someone he trusts. No one is better suited for this job than her. The girl took the contract and thanked the main character with tears in her eyes, after which she looked him in the eyes and said that he should not be so kind to her. But the boy did not listen to her, and very gently took her hand with his own. He watched her gaze closely as suddenly a girl entered the room. She called her mom and said that she had brought her food. The girl was very surprised and looked sadly at her mother, who was standing in the arms of the boy. Tianran looked at the girl in fear and asked why she was here. The main character was even more surprised and, raising his eyebrows, asked why she called her mom. Then the girl ran up to the boy and hit him on the head, exclaiming that he was a bad person. She asked him not to dare to offend her mother, and the bottle flew straight into his forehead. In the principal's office, the mother asked her daughter to apologize and said that the uncle was not bad at all and he was her friend. The girl looked the boy rudely in the eyes and, apologizing, asked if she would suit him. Ye Fei smiled, grabbed his head, and said that she was just a child and didn't understand. The girl closed her eyes in response, grinned, and turned away from the main character. Ye Fei glanced at the girl and said that he didn't even know that she was already married and had a child. The girl wanted to explain something to him, and tears appeared in her eyes. She started apologizing again and said that she really shouldn't be running his company and that she would be resigning. The main character asked her to wait and said that apparently she misunderstood something. He didn't want her to leave and thought to himself that he still needed to finish his task. Ye Fei ran towards the girl and grabbed her hand, looking into her eyes and asking her not to leave. He explained that he was handing over the company to her because he believed in her abilities. He continued to explain that it was not related to anything else. The daughter came up to her mother and stood next to her looking at them. And here before us was a bright, beautiful office in which there was a computer, a printer, and much more. Ye-Fei told Tianran that if she wanted to be a boss, she needed to be able to understand financial reports, income and expense balances, and cost calculations. He explained to the girl that all this was extremely important information, and she listened to him attentively. This is the latest intelligent warehousing system developed in Country A. It allows for efficient and effective management of goods. It's good that they had his financial support, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to dream of such technology. Ye-Fei told the girl that she was very good at her job and that she was a real future business star. Tianran smiled and asked them to stop laughing at her. Meanwhile, her daughter was around the corner watching them. She thought that this was the same guy who wanted to take her mother away from her. Because of him, she's been busy all the time for the last few months and almost never even comes home. She decided to see how he will be with his mother now. The main character suddenly turned around and asked why the door suddenly closed. Tianran picked up the phone and said that she would now call someone to open the door. The girl crossed her arms over her chest and said that there was no connection. For some reason, thinking about it, Ye-Fei threw a jacket over her and asked her to put it on while he tried to kick down the door. Ye-Fei asked her not to do it. She was worried that it was very cold outside and he might freeze. The boy was already trying to cope with the door. He said that it looked like they would have to wait for help. He asked if Vice Director Liu was going to bring them the financial report. Before he could finish speaking, Tianran came up to him and began to hug him tightly with her arms. After all, she was wearing his jacket, while Ye-Fei was only wearing a light t-shirt. The girl explained, clinging to him, that it was at least a little warmer this way, and he cast an absent-minded glance at her. Tianran approached the protagonist and asked him to let her tell her a little about herself and Yaya. The main character was a little scared when he heard someone's name. Tianran continued to hug the protagonist from behind and said that she was just afraid that he would refuse her. Later, she and Jiangze entered the same university. He courted her all the time and even said that the notebook was his. She was touched and decided to give him a chance. In the end, he forced her, and when she got pregnant, he simply abandoned her and their daughter Yaya. The main character, angry, silently called this scoundrel an incredible bastard. The girl said with tears in her eyes that she knew she never finished university and had a child. She was no match for him, but she still loved him. Ye-Fei turned to face her and wiped away his tears, asking her not to say that. He explained that for him, she had not changed at all and was still the same as she was then. They put their heads close to each other and cried together, enjoying each other's company. Suddenly, the doors opened and the man told Mr. Ye-Fei and manager Chen Tianran that he didn't expect that they would be locked in here. The man exclaimed that the refrigerator had frozen his face so much that it had turned red. Tianran, meanwhile, when they went out into the corridor, turned to her daughter and asked how she could do such a thing. The girl turned her around and hit her on the back with her palm, but she couldn't calm down. She asked if her daughter understood that one could die from this and didn't her mother teach her to be a kind person? The main character smiled, took the girl by the hand and said that maybe she was just playing and didn't think. Tianran continued to be angry and said that she did it on purpose. She explained to the boy that she was very disappointed in her, but he did not let go of her hand. The girl, with tears in her eyes, asked the main character not to pretend to be kind. She started pushing him away and saying that he was the one who took her mother away from her. If it weren't for him, her mother wouldn't have hit her. The girl's eyes were very upset and tears were shining in her eyes. Ye-Fei asked Yaya what was wrong with her, but the girl began to cry very loudly and tears flowed down her cheeks. Tianran blushed and exclaimed, afraid for her daughter, that she was having an asthma attack. The main character immediately grabbed the phone and said that he was calling an ambulance. The girl, with tears in her eyes, stretched out her hand to her mother and asked her to save her as soon as possible. Tianran asked Ye-Fei if the ambulance had arrived and cried out with tears in her eyes that her little daughter couldn't breathe. The boy replied that she hadn't arrived yet, and it looked like he would have to wait a little longer. Mengling informed the boy that it had been discovered that the owner needed help. She asked if the owner wanted her to suggest a solution. The delighted boy asked his partner to quickly tell him what to do. Mengling proposed to spend 30 million. The system uses special privileges and uses a helicopter. The protagonist asked her to use it right now, no matter how much it cost. He immediately grabbed the girl in his arms. Tianran asked the boy why they were going upstairs. The main character continued to quickly carry the girl up the steps and asked his classmate to just follow him. When they got to the roof, a helicopter was already landing there. Tianran didn't expect that he actually called a helicopter. The boy was next to the girl and asked her to hold on, reassuring her that they were almost at the hospital. The girl thought to herself that this boy treated her just like a father, and now they found themselves in the room where the girl was placed on a hospital bed. Ye-Fei explained to Tianran that he had already completed all the paperwork. In the coming days, he asked her not to think about the company's affairs but to focus on the child. Before he could finish speaking, the girl ran up to him and began to hug him tightly. She started crying and said that it was good when he was there. Otherwise, what would have happened to her daughter? The main character smiled and told the girl that it was all nonsense and not worth her gratitude. Tianran, wiping away her tears, said that she would definitely return the money for the helicopter to him. The boy continued to calm her down and said that there was no need to do this and that he had firmly decided on this. But Tianran stood her ground and said that she had to return it. Now she also earns well, so she can do it. Ye Fei said that Tianran had now become a businesswoman, not a poor single mother delivering food. The assistant informed the owner that the task was completed and that he had an impressive reward. The classmate was very surprised that this girl called him the master. Ye Fei blushed, sweated a little, and said that it was not at all what she thought. He started pushing Mengling out of the room and asked her to go talk about everything outside. Tianran couldn't understand anything and looked sadly at the boy and the girl who stood next to him. Suddenly, her daughter said to her mother, looking into her eyes, that she must try. The mother was very surprised and looked at the girl who was smiling in her face. She said that the aunt is very beautiful and has a great figure. If she doesn't hurry, then this uncle will be taken away from her. Tianran smiled in response, blushed, and asked what kind of nonsense she was talking about. The girl explained to her mother that Uncle Ye Fei had passed her test and she wanted him to be her dad. The girl asked her mother to just do as she said. Tianran asked where she got all this nonsense from. Mengling explained to the boy that according to the data from the Business Intelligence Network, they had received the secret financial statements of the Gu Corporation. She asked him to read it. When the boy picked up the notebook, he was very surprised. In front of us is Wengu Logistics Company. The boy held the microphone in his hands and then said that now they are inviting Mr. Ye Fei to cut the ribbon. The main character stood in front of all the employees, smiling proudly and greeting everyone. Mengling told the boy that he had bought up a significant portion of the shares of Gu Corporation's logistics division, Wengu Company, so he was now an investor in Gu Company. The main character smiled and replied that it was very good that they had that financial report. Suddenly, Mrs. Gu appeared behind him again and asked him to stop. Turning to the boy, she asked him to talk to her, challenging him to a conversation. The main character immediately turned to the girl and said that of course he was not against talking. Ms. Gu was really angry and asked how he convinced them to sell him the shares. Ye Fei calmly replied that of course he was playing on their fear of being exposed. He asked if Mrs. Gu herself had figured it out. The girl crossed her arms and asked what he meant. Ye Fei asked if she really didn't know. Then the girl continued to stand in front of him and asked him to speak directly and not hide anything. The boy suddenly threw a notebook on the table, which fell with a crash in front of the girl. Ye Fei smiled and asked Mrs. Gu to see what was inside herself, and then she would understand everything. The lady began to open the book and carefully study everything that was written there. Ye Fei explained that this company's logistics routes were significantly more expensive than usual, while the profits were suspiciously low. In addition, the number of orders from some customers and the frequency of shipments do not correspond to the real demand in the market. He leaned towards the girl and asked if she understood what all this meant. Ms. Gu replied that they were hiding the actual composition and volume of the cargo and that they were smuggling. She was very surprised by this and asked why he was looking at her like that. Ye Fei replied that he could tell from her expression that she really didn't know anything about it. The girl replied that she didn't say that she knew everything about the corporation's affairs. Then the main character exclaimed that of course the lady was busy with business and did not delve into details. The girl looked sternly at the boy and said that her father had no intention of trusting her with all the management. The boy was very surprised and asked if Mr. Gu, even at such an age, did not want to hand over the business. The girl smiled in response and said that she wanted to, but he wanted to convey it not to her, but to his illegitimate son. Ye Fei was very surprised and asked if he really had an illegitimate son and why no one knew about it. Mrs. Gu replied that her mother also came from a rich family and her status was not inferior to the Gu family. She had always been successful and how dare she promote some bastard. But if she stumbles even one step, he will give everything to that guy, which she is very afraid of. The main character now understood why she was so prickly and ready to do anything for money. He approached her and said that he could help her defeat this illegitimate son, but only on one condition, and she would do what he said. The girl asked him what exactly he was going to do. Ye Fei replied that he wanted to buy out some of her shares first. She didn't expect this turn of events and gave him a questioning look. Meanwhile, the two girls were talking about something, and one of them asked if Mrs. Gu was there. They started looking out the window, and the girl exclaimed that she was the very favorite of Gu Corporation. She became curious about who this guy was next to. He is so tall and handsome, and they are just a great couple. Shu Wan stood next to him and looked with envy at what her friend was showing. She got angry and asked him to stop staring and go to work immediately. The girl asked why she was in such a hurry and asked to at least let her take a photo. Suddenly, the main character saw Shu Wan out of the corner of his eye and decided to approach her. He approached the girl and, smiling, exclaimed that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Shu Wan told the respected customer that if he was not going to buy the car, he could leave it running. Then the boy smiled again and asked if she really thought he wouldn't be able to buy a car. He promised to give her a supercar as a memento of them. She didn't expect that and smiled back. The girl explained that she only accepts cars from men from her dad. But he is the first one for whom she will make an exception. Ye Fei raised his hand and asked the lady to give him a presentation if she could. The girl smiled in response and said that she would do it with pleasure. And so she started showing different cars and said that this particular model was limited and only a few were produced worldwide. This is the only one in their shop. Ye Fei said that the unique things here are the best, just like her. The girl smiled back and came up to him. She kissed him on the cheek, thanking him for it. She approached him again and told him to keep in mind that if he wanted her to play along with him, it would cost a lot. She explained that she was raising the stakes in the stock deal. The boy was surprised by this. The girl suddenly burst into tears and asked him to stop humiliating her. She started to run away, and with tears in her eyes, she wanted to get away from him as quickly as possible. But the main character suddenly grabbed her hand and asked if she was humiliating herself. If she had shown a little patience then, this car would have been hers by now. The girl replied that she had been arguing with her mother for several years, and hadn't she tried hard enough? She was indeed short-sighted and unlucky. But she asks him not to appear before her again. When she told the boy what she had to say, she immediately ran away. Suddenly, a girl appeared behind him, put her hand on his shoulder and asked if he wanted his new partner to support him a little. Meanwhile, the streamer approached the main character and said that she was the one who dragged him into this. Because of her, even Xinguang shares fell. Ye Fei replied that it wasn't because of her. It was obvious that someone had fabricated this news. It was just incredibly difficult to prove that nothing had happened, and he had definitely hit their weakest spot. Meng Ling approached the gentleman and said that right now all the negotiations were being conducted on a government project. Does he understand the damage this wave of rumors can cause him? Ye Fei looked at her assistant carefully. The streamer then explained that she would simply say that she was the one who seduced Mr. Ye Fei, and he rejected her and asked if that option would be okay. The main character immediately exclaimed that she had clearly gone crazy. And what about her career as a streamer? The girl turned away and explained that if it weren't for Mr. Ye Fei's help, she wouldn't have gotten to where she was now. For this, she is ready to give up streaming in order to protect him, because he helped her so much. Meng Ling grabbed the girl's hand to stop her. She asked her to calm down. And she said that with this video where she tells everything so sincerely, it won't be difficult to wash it off. Then the main character approached his partner and asked the girl if she had set all this up. The streamer was surprised when she saw such sincerity and blushed a little. This chaos continued, and in the comments they wrote about true love and a wonderful couple. Ye Fei suddenly hugged his partner, holding her close, and said that they were just hired commentators. He explained to the girl that they would also invest in the information field and quickly turn everything in the right direction. The streamer suddenly said that now everyone will definitely think that they really are a couple. Meng Ling said that she investigated the accounts of the bots that were causing the wave of hate and found the person behind the scandal. The main character immediately grabbed the girl by the hand and asked who this scoundrel was. The system showed him this guy who was glowing in blue tones and smiling brazenly. Meng Ling explained to the protagonist that this was Gu Ya's half-brother, namely a guy named Gu Ji. Ye Fei was very surprised and said that he had destroyed his shadow business, and this guy decided to ruin it through scandal. The assistant bowed before the owner and asked if he wanted her to help him take revenge. The boy smiled and replied that he had a commercial intelligence network and they could look for information about this guy in it. The assistant immediately resumed the data and a blue network appeared in front of them. She began to dig around in it and exclaimed that she had found what she was looking for, pressing her ear to his. The main character smiled and exclaimed that this was just great, and this guy could still be useful to him.